All right, so you're tuned in, and chances are you're a bit of a finance whiz.
That's our audience.
Exactly. So let's get right to it. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into this thing called the heat lamp theory and what it could mean for retail investors, especially those of you who've really embraced DRS and the whole GameStop saga.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept, especially if you're really into the whole DRS thing and really believe in direct registration of shares.
Right.
And you think you have like this foolproof way to lock up your shares.
Yeah, like I'm taking control.
Right, you're taking control.
Yeah.
You're out of the DTCC, you're away from the short sellers.
Exactly.
This theory really challenges that assumption.
It suggests there could be this like back door, especially with these things called plan shares within a DSPP, right?
Especially with the DSPPs and the way those are structured and
Yeah, a lot of folks see DRS as this, this shield, right?
Right.
Against short selling. But the heat lamp theory is like, well, maybe not so fast.
Yeah, and
What is that all about?
it all hinges on this idea of operational efficiency.
Okay.
And that's how Computershare explains why a portion of those DSPP shares are held at the DTCC.
Oh, interesting.
So even though you think you've got your shares safely registered in your name at Computershare,
Right.
there might be a chunk of them still shilling at the DTCC.
Like a secret stash of burgers in the back, ready to go.
Exactly.
I like that analogy.
It's the burger stash analogy.
So even though I might think my shares are like, totally tucked away safe and sound,
Right.
a portion of them could still be in play for borrowing, potentially.
Potentially, yeah.
And that's where it gets, kind of nefarious.
And it's like, you have a demand spike, right? What do? You
Right.
go to the burger stash,
Yeah.
Same idea here.
So what if, like, someone is deliberately pumping up the volume right before those DRS numbers come out?
Right before those key reporting dates, you see these volume spikes.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, like,
Is that to game the system,
potentially. Yeah.
to make it look like they need more shares at the DTCC?
Yeah, to sort of justify having more of those shares at the DTCC.
And those shares could then be lent out, maybe even impacting the stock price, right?
Potentially. Yeah.
That's kind of crazy.
It raises a lot of questions about transparency
For sure.
and control within the system.
Yeah, because if you're a retail investor and you're going through all this effort to DRS your shares,
Right, you think you're doing the right thing.
yeah, you're like, I'm taking control.
Yeah.
I'm doing this for a reason. And then you find out that there's this potential loophole.
Yeah, and then you find out, there's this guy, Paul Kahn,
Yeah.
the president of global capital markets at Computershare.
Mm-hmm.
He actually acknowledged this.
He said it.
He said a percentage of DSPP shares are held at DTCC.
Yeah, he said it openly, right?
Openly admitted it.
Yeah.
For operational efficiency. Now, they haven't disclosed the exact percentage or the mechanics.
Yeah, they're being kind of vague about it.
Very vague. Yeah.
But that admission alone is pretty significant.
Yeah.
It's like they're confirming there's a burger stash,
Uh-huh.
but they won't tell us how many burgers are in there or who's eating them.
Right. And how they're choosing who gets to eat the burgers.
Exactly.
Yeah, the recipe's a secret.
And that lack of transparency has got to be a little unsettling for investors.
It is. It is, especially for those who are choosing DRS specifically for peace of mind.
Yeah.
They want that control.
Right.
They want to know that their shares are truly locked away.
Exactly.
It really makes you wonder, how much control do you actually have?
And then when you look at the actual trading volume around these DRS reporting dates for GameStop,
Oh, yeah.
often there's a spike
There is.
in the days leading up to the announcement. Now, of course, that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Right. Correlation doesn't equal causation.
But it's a pattern that definitely fits with this heat lamp theory.
It's a pattern.
Like someone's cranking up the heat lamp,
Yeah.
getting those burgers ready for this like surge in demand.
Mm-hmm.
And those burgers, in this case, could be those DSPP shares strategically positioned at the DTCC.
Yeah, to impact those DRS numbers,
Number.
potentially even impacting the stock price.
So it seems like you've got this wave of investors
Yeah.
who are looking to DRS as a way to kind of break free from the traditional system.
Right.
And then you've got this theory suggesting that even that might not be as bulletproof as they think.
Yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic for sure.
It is.
And it really underscores the need for investors to be super vigilant.
Yeah.
Understand the nuances.
Right. So we've got book shares, which are like those pure, untouched DTCC free shares.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have plan shares, which come with this whole DTCC caveat.
Right. And what's crucial to remember is even holding a single fractional share
Oh, wow.
within a DSPP can reclassify your entire account
Real.
as a plan share account.
So if I've got like 1,000 book shares, and then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to add just one little fractional share through a DSPP. Boom. My whole holding could become subject to this heat lamp scenario.
Potentially, yeah.
That's wild.
It is. It highlights a vulnerability that investors need to be aware of.
For sure.
Especially if their goal with DRS is to achieve that maximum separation from the traditional brokerage system.
Yeah, you think you're out and then boom.
Yeah, it's a bit like thinking you've escaped the Matrix.
Right.
Only to find out
There's another layer.
another layer.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so we've established that this heat lamp theory hinges on these DSPP shares being held at the DTCC for operational efficiency. But how exactly does that translate into shares potentially being lent out for short selling?
Great. How do we get from point A to point B?
Let's break it down.
All right. So the DTCC, right, they play this big role in short selling.
Right, they're like the middleman.
Yeah, like this big facilitator. And there's this thing, Regulation SHO, it mandates that investors have to actually locate shares.
Like find shares to borrow.
Yeah, before they can even start short selling.
Okay.
It's supposed to prevent this thing called naked short selling.
Which is where you sell shares you don't even have.
You're selling shares you haven't even confirmed you can borrow.
So like you're making a bet that you can find them later.
Right, exactly.
Risky business.
Yeah, very risky. And so the heat lamp theory suggests that those DSPP shares just sitting there at the DTCC.
Even though they belong to, regular investors.
Right, retail investors, they could be used as locates for short selling.
Without the investor even knowing.
Without their consent.
Sneaky.
It is, yeah.
So even though I might think I've locked up my shares nice and safe with DRS.
Right, you're thinking you're good.
A portion of them could still be out there fueling this short selling machine.
Yeah, potentially.
That's kind of unsettling.
It is, and it gets even trickier when you think about how the DTCC actually manages their inventory.
Oh yeah, they've got this massive pool of shares.
It's huge, right? They're constantly juggling supply and demand to make sure trades settle smoothly.
Like a giant game of Tetris.
Exactly, a high-speed game of Tetris with millions of shares flying around.
So how do these DSPP shares fit into this Tetris game?
Imagine them as those long, straight pieces that can fit in anywhere.
Oh yeah, the ones that can clear multiple lines.
Exactly.
Okay.
The DTCC might use those DSPP shares to fill gaps, to meet margin requirements.
Even for options trading, right?
Oh yeah, all sorts of things.
To keep the system running smoothly.
Yeah, they need that liquidity.
But all this operational efficiency could come at a cost.
For those retail investors who specifically chose DRS.
Because they wanted to limit the number of shares available for that kind of activity.
Right. They're trying to do the opposite.
It seems almost counterintuitive.
It does.
It's like, hey, we need your burgers to keep the kitchen running.
Even if you wanted them all for yourself.
Exactly.
It's all happening behind the scenes, too.
Yeah, the lack of transparency again.
We know Computershare holds some DSPP shares at the DTCC.
Right, but the specifics are murky.
Very murky.
The percentage, the criteria for lending, who's overseeing all this.
It's all a bit of a mystery.
No wonder so many retail investors are skeptical.
They're demanding more clarity.
More accountability.
And more control over their own assets.
It's like shining a light on this dark corner of the market.
Exactly.
So what can investors actually do if they're worried about all this?
Well, we've talked about avoiding DSPPs altogether.
Right.
And converting plan shares to book shares.
But are there other things they can do? More proactive steps?
One thing that's gaining popularity is avoiding limit orders.
When buying through Computershare.
Exactly.
Okay, remind me how limit orders work again.
So a limit order is where you specify the price you're willing to pay for a share.
Okay.
And the concern is that might lead to you accidentally buying plan shares.
The ones at the DTCC.
Yep.
So if I want to make absolutely sure I'm getting those pristine book shares, a market order is the way to go.
That's the general idea.
Where I just take whatever the current price is.
Right, you're not setting a specific price.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it's always a good idea to double check with Computershare.
Just to be safe.
Yeah, make sure those shares are going to be registered as book shares.
Completely outside the DTCC.
That's the goal.
So it's all about being informed.
Absolutely.
And being proactive. And really understanding how these different order types work.
That's key.
And understanding the heat lamp theory itself.
Right.
It's complex, but by breaking it down step by step.
We can start to see the impact on investors and the market as a whole.
So we've got the mechanics, the evidence, some investor strategies. But what about the bigger picture?
The big picture.
What are the long-term implications of this heat lamp theory?
Good question.
What could it mean for the future of share ownership?
That's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
So the big picture, huh?
Yeah, it feels like we're watching this like tug of war
Yeah.
between, the old guard of Wall Street,
Yeah.
the establishment,
And this new wave of
the
investors.
rebels.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're demanding transparency. They want control.
They're not messing around.
They're not.
They're asking the tough questions.
Yeah, it's the rise of the retail investor, right?
Absolutely.
They're not just going to sit back and let things happen
They're
anymore.
engaged, they're informed.
And the heat lamp theory is kind of like,
A symptom of that.
yeah, it's a sign of the times, really.
Yeah, it's forcing us to rethink some basic assumptions about share ownership.
About the whole system, really.
Yeah, the role of these intermediaries, like the DTCC.
Right, like, do we even need them?
That's a big question.
Could this push for direct ownership, like, change the market entirely?
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, could we see a future where traditional brokers are obsolete?
It's not impossible.
Wow.
Think about blockchain technology.
Yeah.
Tokenized securities. What if you didn't need the DTCC at all?
It's like cutting out the middleman completely. That would be huge.
It would be revolutionary.
But let's get back to, the here and now.
Right, practical advice.
Yeah, our listeners, they're smart. They get this stuff.
They do.
But they're probably feeling a little uneasy after this whole heat lamp discussion.
Understandably so.
What's your advice to them?
First thing, don't panic.
Yeah, easy to say, hard to do.
It is, but knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely.
The more you understand, the better you can navigate this stuff.
So stay informed, do your research,
Ask questions. Don't just take things at face value.
challenge the system.
Exactly.
Don't just blindly trust what you're told.
Right. Do your own due diligence.
Second, diversify your sources of information.
Don't just rely on the mainstream media.
Or those big institutions,
There are so many independent researchers out there,
bloggers, analysts.
people who are really on the cutting edge of this stuff.
They're often ahead of the curve.
They are.
Form your own opinions. Don't just follow the herd.
Think for yourself.
And finally, be patient.
Yes. Good things take time,
Change doesn't happen overnight.
especially in a system as entrenched as this one.
But by staying engaged, asking tough questions, advocating for transparency,
Investors can help shape a better system.
a fairer system for everyone.
That's the goal.
Those are great takeaways.
I hope so.
This heat lamp theory really shows how something that seems simple
Like DRS.
can actually be incredibly complex.
There are so many layers.
It really underscores the importance of staying informed, being critical.
Doing your homework.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that we're always learning,
Yeah, the market is always changing.
constantly evolving.
This has been a great conversation.
It,
We've covered a lot.
into ground.
And I have a feeling we'll be revisiting this topic.
Oh yeah, the story's not over.
It's just the beginning.
Keep your eyes peeled.
As always, we encourage our listeners to do their own research.
Stay curious. Stay engaged.
The more you know, the better equipped you are.
Absolutely.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll catch you next time.